the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. When the average temperature changes 1 degree, we often don't notice as we go about our day-to-day business. But for farm workers in the fields, even 1 degree warmer can have a devastating impact as they struggle in extreme heat conditions. So what are the risks for farm workers in extreme heat, and what can be done to help mitigate those risks? That's the topic of tomorrow's St. Luke's Climate and Health series on climate change in farming, worker protections, and community resiliency. Joining us now to talk more are Irene Ruiz, Executive Director of the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils, and Amanda Blanchette, an Emergency Medicine Physician Assistant and the Executive Director of ICCH. Welcome to the both of you. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Good, thanks.
All right. Irene, let's start with you. You've been an advocate for farm worker protections. Can you just kind of describe what kind of conditions that farm workers face in the field for all those of us who haven't had to do that job?
Yeah, I'm actually also a former farm worker. I worked in the fields for at least 12 years. And so I understand a little bit of what's going on. Of course, there has been climate changes since then, and I haven't done this work for at least a couple decades. But farm workers a lot of times have to be out there in the extreme heat because at times there's no other reason. At times they have to be there because when you work in the fields, you don't get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid, and they have to, feed and sustain their families and take care of their families. So when they work out there, it's super hot. At times it gets exhausting. You can get dehydrated if you don't have the correct protection equipment that is needed. It can feel really suffocating at times. Luckily, there are some places where they allow them to not work in that extreme heat, but not everyone's that lucky. And what we've been hearing from farm workers is that it has been changing. It's been getting hotter. They're noticing it, especially some of the folks who have been doing this for over 20 years have actually been talking about how climate change is really affecting the way they're working and how it's affecting their bodies and how they're noticing that it is affecting the way they work.
Well, we drive by fields all the time. When you're going anywhere, especially in the Treasure Valley or in some of the more rural parts of Idaho, and you see these fields and they go on and on and on, and there are no trees, there's no awnings, there's nowhere to get shade, right?
No, and a lot of places they're pretty barren. There's like you said, there really isn't trees, there's no sections for shade. And so a lot of the times a lot of people resort to having to like pop open their hoods or their trunks to get some kind of relief from the heat or try to find some way to get that kind of relief. And that's something that, I remember doing as a kid, popping trunks and things like that to make sure that we get kind of some relief from the heat, finding some kind of shade. And so, yeah, there's not enough resources out there to provide shade for farm workers, and we need to start figuring out what we need to do to help support them with that.
And Amanda, can you come into the conversation here? Talk about extreme heat and farm worker health. What are we talking about? What kinds of dangers are there with when you get too hot in this kind of situation?
Sure. Yeah. So, not only, I think we've all felt it in some of the hotter summers, and every year is getting more intense in the duration and the intensity of the heat itself. And these workers are not just feeling that externally, but they're moving their bodies to a degree with this very demanding work for hours at a time without any breaks. And so there's also that internal heat generation as well, especially when there's not structured breaks or drinking water or resting under shade. They're going sometimes for hours and hours at a time. And what that can lead to is effectively what looks like a fever in their body. So just read a study that up to 50% of farmers will have a temperature, core body temperature above 100.4 Fahrenheit daily. And what we see as a result of that are problems with kidneys, kidney injury, and even kidney failure, as well as problems with heat stroke and heat exhaustion. And the difference between those is that when you get to the point of heat stroke, you're actually having problems with thinking and confusion. And then also respiratory problems are much bigger in Idaho because of the times where we don't have as clean air and we're seeing wildfires. So there are a myriad of health effects, and the way we can prevent those and help these farm workers is really simple. And there's a bunch of co-benefits if we can provide structured rest and time for hydrating.
Well, and Irene, I want to go a little bit deeper into some of these challenges that farm workers face on the ground every day. Um, we talked about shade, obviously heat. There's often no water, no access to water. I mean, you're in the middle of a giant field. It's not like you can just walk up to the water fountain. Um, I read about sometimes when you're a farm worker, you have to wear protective gear, and that can be very hot, and you can't sweat or get the heat out any other way. What are some of the other reasons that we're talking about that changing climate can really affect you?
Well, yeah, I mean, wearing protection equipment it can make farm workers very hot, especially what Amanda said that they're moving a lot in the heat, and so their body temperature rises up. And they also have to protect themselves from pesticide poisoning in case there's pesticides out in the fields, as well as smoke that happens because of forest fires. And a lot of the times they should be wearing N95 masks to prevent themselves from inhaling those particles. So you kind of we're telling farm workers you need to wear all this protective equipment, but we're not offering solutions on how do we keep their bodies cool, or how are we going to support them when they're wearing this protection equipment so they're not overheating, right? And so we need to figure out, there needs to be a way where we can provide better education to a lot of these folks, where they're able to use protection equipment correctly, or wherever they can get tips on how they can protect themselves from different kinds of elements when it comes to climate change.
Well, let's look at some of those possible solutions or ways to help. And we're speaking with Irene Ruiz, Executive Director of the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils, and Amanda Blanchette, an emergency medicine physician assistant. Amanda, one of the things that I was looking at talked about, something as simple as not drinking soda when you're working outdoors in the heat, in the fields. What's wrong with soda? Why can't I hydrate with a Coke or 7-Up or something?
Yeah, I'd probably rather someone drink something than nothing, but water is our preferred, and electrolyte solutions as well. The high sugar of soda is, and then also some of the salt, it's not great for this population when they're already at risk with their kidneys, and sometimes already having higher rates of diabetes, actually, just even from exposures. So we certainly prefer water.
Water and electrolytes, right? They're drinking the right thing.
Yes, and ideally drinking 8 ounces every 30 minutes or so.
Wow.
Taking breaks, especially when it's over 77 degrees. Something to pay attention to is the actual feeling of the heat versus the number. We're lucky in Idaho that it's dry, but our numbers get way higher than that. But you do have to consider the humidity, direct sun, and then heat sinks as well when there's more concrete or reflective heat around you. That can make the how it feels even hotter than the number you're seeing.
What other kind of ideas can help mitigate some of these things?
Simple shade structures, as well as access to free water. There's some studies that look at these are investments of like $100 per worker per year. They're not that significant. And really simple. Like we're looking at shade, water, and then sometimes some additional evaporative cooling techniques like having a fan and a spray bottle, or even a cooling vest in cases of emergencies. That there's just a place that they can go outside of the heat and the direct sun.
Irene,
Oh,
you've been in this situation. Are these kind of changes possible? Are these realistic solutions? I mean, is this something that can actually happen?
they're realistic solutions. They're pretty easy in my mind. I mean, they're easy to do. It's easy to give folks mandated water breaks. That's something farm workers have been asking with the ones we've been talking. And there's organizations like mine. We have a heat and smoke relief fund that's named after JJ Saldana, who was an amazing Latino leader. And we go out there and we do a fundraiser, and we get supplies donated, and we take water, we take electrolyte packs, sunscreen, coolers, cooling scarves, anything that we need to do to like make sure that they're getting what they need to protect themselves from the heat. And this is something we've been doing. This will be our 6th year this year to do that. And so it's important that we try to support as a community, to be able to support farm workers. They're the ones that put food on our tables. And we're lucky that we have a mutual aid fund that allows us to do this kind of work, but also for us to do some classes around heat, how to protect yourself from the heat is super important. So we're hoping to start those soon, this coming year as well. Just those little things I think make a huge difference. It's not hard to do that. It's not hard to have rules, but it does take time. Bureaucracy is a lot, right? And it takes time. And I know for a while OSHA was trying to get some federal heat regulations, but I don't think those are going to be in a standstill for at least right now. So it's not hard, in my opinion.
Amanda, do you see sort of the effects of this firsthand? Your emergency medicine physician assistant. Do you see the effects of heat stroke and this sort of thing?
I do. I just had I work across the valley. I work in Nampa and Fruitland as well as Boise, and I just had a patient yesterday who came in after working as a ranch hand without sufficient rest. But something to note is that a lot of these symptoms are underreported. So there is a fear around the cost of medical care, oftentimes language barriers, or just not feeling like it's part of the culture to report these things when it's honestly, unfortunately, so common that this population's dealing with it. And so I am seeing it, and not just isolated to farm workers, but also construction workers and landscapers, et cetera, a lot of these outdoor jobs, although farm workers do seem to have some of the worst rates. But yeah, it's visible, it's in the community, and I think it's unfortunately increasing as the rates of extreme heat goes up each year.
And how can people help? Irene, you mentioned a fundraiser. Are there other ways? Talk about that and other ways that people might be able to assist.
Yeah, I mean, we will hopefully this month, or at least beginning of May, we'll start our 5th annual JJ Saldana Heat and Smoke Fund. We're already getting some folks getting supplies out there right now. But once we get that information out there, people can go on our socials, on Instagram, Facebook, and if they want to donate through our Give Butter link, that would be a great way to help us. That way we can get those resources out to folks that really need it, specifically the farm workers, and just anything like just, supporting the work that we do as an organization. We're here to provide this help to farm workers when it comes around classes and things like that. We're also doing a storytelling project that we're hoping to get there to talk around how heat and climate change is affecting them too. And so I think as IORC, we are really just trying to make sure that the voice of the farm workers out there and people are hearing them and they're not invisible anymore. And so those are just ways that you can help us, just supporting us as an organization, but also our heat fund once we get that going.
Well, good luck to both of you. We've been speaking with Irene Ruiz, Executive Director of the Idaho Organization of Resource Councils, and Amanda Blanchette. She's an emergency medicine physician assistant. They're going to be speaking tomorrow as part of St. Luke's Climate and Health Series. The talk is titled Climate Change in Farming, Worker Protections and Community Resiliency. And we will put a link to the talk and some more links on our website, BoiseStatePublicRadio.org.
You've been listening to Idaho Matters from Boise State Public Radio. I'm Gemma Gaudet.